Hello. This is a prose reading of a story called The Far and the Near by Thomas Wolfe. I've made a few modifications to it. One is that I changed the point of view to first person to make it more of a personal narrative. And the other is that I shortened it because it was about 15 minutes and I didn't want it to be that long. I wanted to give a 10-minute version of it. Thomas Wolfe was a great American writer from the 1920s and 30s. He died at a very young age, around 40, of tuberculosis. His most famous novel is Look Homeward, Angel. I consider him a great writer. There's a great movie about him called Genius, if you want to. I think it's free on YouTube. Great story about him and his friendship with Maxwell Perkins, who was an editor at Scribner's, or no, Simon & Schuster. And he, Max Perkins, was one of the few famous editors of all time. Some people say he made Hemingway's career and Fitzgerald's career. Probably more true of Fitzgerald, because Hemingway probably didn't need too much editing, very concise sentences. Fitzgerald, however, Max Perkins took his 800-page novel and condensed it to about 250. That's The Great Gatsby. He also renamed it from West Egg to The Great Gatsby. So some people say we wouldn't have Fitzgerald if it weren't for Perkins. But anyway, great movie if you're interested in that sort of thing. So this is The Far and the Near by Thomas Wolfe. On the outskirts of a little town, upon a rise of land that swept back from the railway, there was a tidy little cottage of white boards trimmed vividly with green blinds. To one side of the house there was a garden neatly patterned, with plots of growing vegetables and an arbor of grapes which ripened late in August. Before the house there were 3 mighty oaks, which sheltered it in their clean and massive shade in summer, and on the other side there was a border of gay flowers. The whole place had an air of tidiness, thrift, and modest comfort. Every day, a few minutes after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the limited express between 2 cities passed this spot. At the moment, the great train, having halted for a breathing space at the town nearby, was beginning to lengthen evenly in its stroke. But it had not yet reached the full drive of its terrific speed. It swung into view deliberately, swept past with a powerful, swaying motion of the engine, a low, smooth rumble of the heavy cars pressed upon steel, and then it vanished in the cut. For a moment, the progress of the engine could be marked by heavy, bellowing puffs of smoke that burst at spaced intervals above the edges of the meadow grass. And finally, nothing could be heard but the solid, clacking tempo of the wheels receding into the drowsy stillness of the afternoon. Every day, for more than 20 years, as the train had approached this house, I, the engineer, blew on the whistle, and every day, as soon as she heard this signal, a woman appeared on the back porch of the little house and waved to me. At first, she had a small child clinging to her skirts. And now this child had grown to full womanhood, and every day she too came with her mother to the porch and waved. I had grown old and gray in service. I had driven my great train loaded with its weight of lives across the land 10,000 times. My own children had grown up and married, and 4 times I had seen before me on the tracks the ghastly dot of tragedy converging like a cannonball to its eclipse of horror at the boiler head. A light spring wagon filled with children, with its clustered row of small, stunned faces. A cheap automobile, stalled upon the tracks, set with the wooden faces of people, paralyzed with fear. A battered hobo walking by the rail, too deaf and old to hear the whistle's warning. And a form flung past my window with a scream. All this I have seen and known. I have known all the grief all the joy, all the peril and labor that I could know. I have grown seamed and weathered in my loyal service, and now, schooled by the qualities of faith and courage and humbleness that attended my labor, I have grown old. But no matter what peril or tragedy I had known, the vision of that little house and the women waving to me with a brave, free motion of the arm became fixed in my mind as something beautiful and enduring, something beyond all change and ruin, and something that would always be the same, no matter what mishap, grief, or error might break the iron schedule of my days. The sight of this little house and these two women gave me the most extraordinary happiness I had ever known. I had seen them in 1,000 lights, 100 weathers. I had seen them through the harsh light of wintry gray, across the brown and frosted stubble of the earth, and I had seen them again in the green, luring sorcery of April. I felt for them and for this little house in which they lived such tenderness as a man might feel for his own children, and at length the picture of their lives was carved so sharply in my heart that I felt that I knew their lives completely, to every hour and moment of the day, and I resolved that one day, when my years of service should be ended, I would go and find these people and speak at last with them whose lives had been wrought, who so wrought into my own. That day came. Retired, at last, I stepped from a train onto the station platform of the town where these two women lived. I walked slowly through the station and out into the streets of the town. Everything was as strange to me as if I had never seen this town before. As I walked on, my sense of bewilderment and confusion grew. Could this be the town I had passed 10,000 times? Were these the same houses I had seen so often from the high windows of my cab? It was all as unfamiliar, as disquieting as a city in a dream, and the perplexity of my spirit increased as I went on. Presently, the street faded into a country road, the one on which the women lived. At length I stood before the house I sought. I knew at once that I had found the proper place. I saw the lordly oaks before the house and the flower beds, the garden and the arbor, and farther off, the glint of rails. Yes, this was the house I sought, the place I had passed so many times, the destination I had longed for with such happiness. But now that I had found it, now that I was here, why did my hand falter on the gate? Why did the town, the road, the earth, the very entrance to this place I loved, turn unfamiliar as the landscape of some ugly dream? Why did I now feel this sense of confusion, doubt, and hopelessness? In a moment more, I mounted 3 short steps that led up to the porch and was knocking on the door. Presently, I heard steps in the hall. The door was opened, and a woman stood facing me. And instantly, with a sense of bitter loss and grief, I was sorry I had come. I knew at once that the woman who stood there looking at me with a mistrustful eye was the same woman who had waved to me so many thousand times. But her face was harsh and pinched and meager. The flesh sagged wearily in sallow folds, and the small eyes peered at me with timid suspicion and uneasy doubt. All the brave freedom, the warmth and affection that I had read into her gesture vanished in the moment that I saw her and heard her unfriendly tongue. And now my own voice sounded unreal and ghastly to me as I tried to explain my presence, to tell her who I was and the reason I had come. But I faltered on, fighting stubbornly against the horror of regret, confusion, disbelief that surged up in my spirit, drowning all my former joy and making my act of hope and tenderness seem shameful to me. At length the woman invited me almost unwillingly into her house and called her daughter with a harsh, shrill voice. Then for a brief agony of time I sat in an ugly little parlor, and I tried to talk while the two women stared at me with a dull, bewildered hostility, a sullen, timorous restraint. And finally, stammering a crude farewell, I departed. I walked away down the path, and then along the road toward the town, and suddenly I knew that I was an old man. My heart, which had been brave and confident when it looked along the familiar vista of the rails, was now sick with doubt and horror as it saw the strange and unsuspected visage of the earth which had always been within a stone's throw of me, and which I had never really seen or known. And I knew that all the magic of that bright lost way, the vista of that shining light, the imagined corner of that small, good universe of hope's desire was gone and could never be got back.